Hello, welcome to another FMOD deep dive. Today we're talking about reverbs. Today I'm joined by my good friend Jon Kelliher, who is the principal audio designer at No Breaks Games, currently working on Human Fall Flat 2. And together we're going to be talking about how to implement reverb systems in FMOD. It's a really common question and problem that I get from beginners using FMOD, especially like, how do I implement reverbs? How do I best advise the developer on the project that I'm currently working on? What's the best way to do it? So today we're going to be talking about all of the methods that we know, right from level 1 and upwards. Each method and system is going to be a little bit more detailed, a little bit more in depth, and scalable depending on the project that we're working on. And we'll eventually get into the methods that Jon and I use on the professional projects that we are currently working on. Speaking of professionally practiced methods, if you are currently learning FMOD and preparing for paid work in game audio, you might be interested in my course FMOD Challenges. In there you get a bunch of exercises around the most common adaptive systems that we have to implement as sound designers, including solution videos and templates that you can download and use on a project that you are currently working on. I'm also there to give everybody constant feedback in the group chat that we have in order to make sure everybody has the skills and the confidence they need to go after the work that they want. That being said, let's jump straight into the deep dive at level 1. Okay, well, we can do a little hello, Jon. Wow, it's been so nice to see you again, kind of thing. And then
like I'm a kindergartner.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the introduction, by the way. Everything we're talking about now, this is going to go in. Hi, Jon. How's it going?
Hey, Sergio. Yeah, really good. Thanks. I'm really stoked to be here and chat about reverbs and FMOD, which, we spent a lot of time in FMOD and learned lots of neat little tricks. So thought it'd be really cool to discuss some points and focus on an area that isn't really discussed much.
100%, 100%. I'm so glad you are the person doing this because, as you know, I've asked you many questions about this and I've used things that you've taught me in projects that I'm currently working on. So, without further ado, let's talk about like the level 1, so to speak. Like, what's like the base level thing? I just want reverb in my game. What do we do?
Cool, yeah. So, well, we've got some sound effects here. So we've got like some footsteps, we got some like a spell and some explosions. So I'll just play them very quickly, and then I'll sort of show you like what level 1 would be for one of them. So we've got our footsteps here, spell, and some beefy explosions. So we'll take the footsteps first, and what you might do is you've got this reverb effect. And you can just add a reverb to your master strip for this event. And yeah, now if I play it, then I've got reverb. Might be a little bit intense, but yeah. So that's probably level 1. After that, I'd say level 2 is, well, we have 3 events and we want them to all have the same like reverb so that they share the same space. Now it'd probably be a little bit crazy to copy this and then paste it on here and then have the same thing duplicated across hundreds if not thousands of different assets, because that would just be madness to keep.
Why is that?
Sorry, you can ask it without me interrupting again.
It's fine. Why would that be crazy? Just to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, so if you've got it duplicated across multiple places and you want to, I don't know, you want to change the reverb time, and then you have to go through each one and make sure that you change the reverb time like equally across all of them, or do the same thing over and over, and you're just introducing a lot of like human error. I would also say that if you're adding a reverb plugin or a reverb effect to every individual asset, then that's taking up unnecessary resources that we could do this in a more performant way. I'd say probably like step 1.5 is we could create an effect chain that is reusable across the game. And we could create that effect chain and then duplicate that across the events. And now if I change my reverb time here, this is going to get changed across all of them. So essentially they're prefabs. So that's kind of cool. But again, we can go further with this.
Awesome. Okay. So that's level 1, so to speak. What would be the next step then?
So after that, what I'd probably do is I'd say, all right, we've got our mixer here, and these events are under the sound effects group. And what that allows us to do is we can, we could apply effects to all of these events in the mixer. So what I might do is I might add reverb here on my sound effects bus or group. And now this reverb effect is going to like be applied to all of these events that are under this group. So I guess if I go back into my here, we don't have anything here in the master channel strip or the master track of the event, but we're still getting our reverb because that's being sent through this this group. So that's probably number 2, like level 2.
And this is better because it's better than the effects chain, because the effects chain involves us adding it to every single event, which you can do pretty much in one go, right? Because it's you could do what is the word, like multi-select, and just add that in, right? If you selected all the events. However, that would also mean a reverb plugin per event, which is an insane amount of like CPU budget being used. Whereas this is just one reverb, right? And anything that we put into this group is using that reverb.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So rather than having it duplicated, which, as I said, like introduces human error. So if, say you forget to add it to a new event that you're creating, that's one thing. But yeah, also the sort of resources that would be used for having this same event or the same effect that's the same across all events. Yeah, it would just be unnecessary versus just using this one effect on a group. So yeah, so this is cleaner, it's more performant, and it's nice. But we can take it further.
We can take it further.
Gasp.
What is next, John?
So after this, I'd say level 3 is we might not want all of our events under the same group. So we have these sound effects, and these sound effects might be under different groups. So we might have explosions and Foley and magic. And we might put all of these under here. And we've got our explosions and we've got our footsteps. So putting the reverb on the general SFX bus might be quite overkill, because we might want to send different amounts of input into the reverb based on which group there is. So for example, your explosions, you might want loads of reverb, and your Foley, you might only want a little bit. So what we can do then is copy this, and FMOD very nicely, like by default in the mixer, has a reverb bus in the mixer. What we can do with this, it's a return, which means that we can send signal from a bus or an event or whatever as an effect to this this return track, which essentially allows us to split our signal and process it how we like. So what I might do here is I'll add my reverb to this bus. And then what I can do is on these buses, I keep on saying buses, but I should probably say groups.
I understand what you mean. Like, yeah, your DAW, right? Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. We can send different amounts of signal from each group to the reverb bus to apply reverb to it. And the way we do that is we can add a send rather than an effect here. And we can send to the reverb bus. Yeah, we can just do this across each one of them. And now, okay, yeah, so we can send these the signal from each of these buses to our reverb bus. And the only thing that I would say is that we don't want any dry signal coming through here, or we might do, but we're just going to be duplicating the signal that's going to be coming out of these buses. And we just want the wet level, which we can change the volume of here. And now if we go back into into here, we have each of these events are going to have reverb applied to them. And that's great.
And now, crucially, you can control the amount that each of these groups is sent to the reverb, because each one has its own send fader.
Absolutely. So if we have our Foley bus here and we turn that down because we might not want as much reverb, that feels a lot better. So this is great because it gives us a lot more control over how much signal we're sending to the reverb bus based on each like sound effect group or whatever group we decide, like grouping system we decide to use.
how would we take this one step further if we're tackling like a much bigger scale game and we have several different reverbs? How might we tackle that?
Yeah, so that's interesting. We can create multiple different return tracks for like each different type of reverb that we have. Or we could do a simpler option, which is we might want to change this, like these reverb settings dynamically. And things like bubble systems have become quite popular in games recently, where based on like in-game parameters, say for example, the distance you are to a wall or the density of the material that a wall is made of, we can change these tracks dynamically, and we can send parameters from the game to automate this. And the way that we would do that, we would, add automation to these tracks based, or to these parameters based on whatever parameters that we're sending. But we won't really look at that because we're not looking at bubble systems today. But what we could do is we could add snapshots. So here I've got some snapshots for like a small reverb and a large reverb. And what we might want to do is we might want our reverb by default to have like no wet level, and we don't want anything playing out of it because there's no reverb. But as soon as we set one of these snapshots to play, we can add some defaults here. So we've got a small living room and a large, what do we choose?
I like the parking
We'll just,
lot. Or
yeah,
the,
let's do the parking lot. Yeah, we'll set that quite high just so that we can hear them. And yeah, so once we've got these snapshots, what we can do here is we can play them, and we can go back to our events. And now when we're playing them, we'll hear that there's reverb coming through. This is without. And with, we can turn it up a little bit. You can hear that that's being applied. And if we play our large reverb, we can hear that that's being applied as well. This is also being applied across all of them because we've set up the buses to be sent to the reverb bus. So that's what we can do. We can apply these snapshots to drive this one reverb effect on the reverb bus, and that's really handy. That's for most single player indie games, potentially even bigger games. You could get away with just having this one reverb effect and driving it via snapshots. But we could probably take it further and make it even more versatile.
what? Another layer? Another level? Please tell me.
Cool. Yeah. So what we could do is I'm going to create a new group here and just call it reverb, just to have a nice folder hierarchy. And we've still got our reverb bus here, but what we want is I've still got this on the snapshot. What we want is we want different types of reverbs that we can configure without necessarily having to turn on and off snapshots constantly. So I'm going to remove this, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to create new returns. So reverb underscore small and large, and I'm going to nest them under the reverb group. And now we can organize things. And then what I can do here is add a reverb. I can set this large one to the parking lot that we had before. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my dry level down again, and I'm going to turn this up, and then add another one here, do the same, and add the auditorium. Cool. So now what we have is we have these two reverb buses, and now we need to send our signal here. So our sound effect buses here they're already sending to our reverb bus, and this is getting signal from these that we can then pass on to these other groups. The only thing is that we don't want that signal to be coming out of this bus as well. Like, we don't want the sound effects to be coming out from here, as well as, say, for example, our explosions bus. So we'll want to turn down the volume of this, but we can do pre-fader sends to our to our reverb groups. So we can add another send here and our large. Now that we have these sends on the reverb bus, what we can do is we can use snapshots to drive these send amounts, and we can do that by clicking on here. We've got our small reverb. We can scope in and we can set that to 0. And then for our large reverb, we've done that already. Now what we can do is we can play this small reverb and go back to here. And if we stop it, it's quite subtle. And that's much more noticeable. So we can still use snapshots to drive our reverbs, but now rather than having to scope in and out of just one like reverb effect where all the parameters are changing, now we can have these different reverb buses and change them individually without necessarily having to worry about like having wiped any settings from a different snapshot or whatever. It's easier to see these next to each other and sort of compare them when they're on these different sends, when they're on these different returns.
So it's clearer for us to think about, right? To know that if I needed like 10 different types of reverbs, I can see them all in my reverb group, nicely organized. Is there another advantage to having these attached to snapshots, like the sends attached to snapshots, as opposed to the one reverb changing settings?
I guess it's just the same difference, really. Like I personally find that to test snapshots is quite like difficult to see, because obviously you need to have the snapshot there, and then you've got these like all these different parameters that you can scope in on, and then these tabs are kind of a bit of a faff to navigate as well. So, we have to go to the routing tab, and then we have to go to the snapshot, and then we have to select a different snapshot. And sometimes you come out of it and forget that you're actually still scoped in on on a different snapshot. So I find that this just tends to be like a cleaner way of doing it. It does mean that you need this reverb bus to sort of like act as a controller to send things to, rather than individually sending to each reverb bus on each group. So I guess that's probably another benefit, is the fact that we can send everything to one reverb bus, and then this reverb bus just acts as a controller to do whatever you want with it. So you're minimizing the amount of contact points within your mixer, or I guess within your whole project as well. So yeah, there's another benefit to having it like this as well. And of course, there are many ways to skin the cat, but we could also send or like activate multiple reverbs at the same time. We wouldn't necessarily always want to have like 3 reverbs, blending together, because that can sometimes sound like a bit of a mess, but there might be benefits to it. So say, for example, we might also want to add some like reflections in there as well. So we might add a new return, and we go reverb underscore short reflections. And we can do the same thing again. We can add an echo or a delay, and we can turn down the dry level and turn down the feedback a little bit and say, I don't know, like 50 or 32 milliseconds. Then what we need to do is we need to, in our reverb bus, add another send to the short reflections, add another snapshot, short reflections, and scope that in, set that to 0. And now what we can do is we can mix and match these snapshots. Because they're not driving the same parameter, we can just leave it as overriding. Otherwise, you could use them as blending snapshots as well, where they'll you can change the intensity of each of them to change the blend amount, but we won't worry about that. We can just say that we'll turn on 2 of these snapshots by pressing play. So we've got our short reflections, and then we've got our large reverb. And now if we go to the footsteps, you can hear that we've also added this like short delay in there as well to help make the space feel more real. And depending on what we want to do, we can change the whether we have short reflections or large reflections or whatever. We can change the space from multiple Oh, we can change the characteristics of the space that we're in.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so there's way more controllability and way more flexibility having this like master reverb bus and separate buses for each reverb. It's great. Um, could we then also potentially add this to an effects chain in some way, like the sends?
So, like anything with dealing with, what am I trying to say? So there's a problem that comes from dealing with reverbs purely on a mix level, because all of our sounds from each bus are going to be sent directly uh, to this reverb bus. What we could do is potentially we could split things up into like even more granular groups. But what happens when you say you've got like a split screen game? Then you have to make the decision between, do we blend between reverbs based on the room that one player is in versus another player? Or do we prioritize the room that one player is in and, we just say, sod the other person, they're just going to have to not hear their sound effects from the reverb that's representative of their room. So there's no perfect way of doing this. FMOD thankfully deals with things like attenuation and panning for multiple listeners, but what we can't really do is distinguish the like which listener is hearing like which reverb. What we can do is we can do something a little bit like, dare I say it, hackier, but I guess something more creative. And what we can do with that is we can emulate what we're doing on the buses, or in fact, we can emulate what we're doing on the reverb bus, but we can do that on a per effect basis. So we can take all of these sends. Can we? Well, let's delete all of these sends and delete this on all of the groups. And let's go back to our events. And now we're kind of at the start again. And what we want to do is we want to send to our mixer and we want to send to these reverbs. So let's just take the large and small. Sorry, where are we? Here, yeah. Large, small, and we want our early reflections as well, which are here, our short reflections. And what we can do is we can create an effect chain and add these to that. And now we've got our effect chain that we can copy and paste across all of our events. So in fact, actually, we probably want this after the fader because we're using the fader to drive the gain amount. And we'll do that there. And now what we can do is, like the bubble system that I described, which we're using in-game parameters to send to FMOD to drive, our reverb sends or our reverb parameters. So in this case, what we could do is we could create a reverb type, and I've already created one, but essentially it's a labeled parameter and called reverb type, and we've got our small and large reverbs. And then what we can do is automate them. So for a small reverb, we can set this to 0, and we can do the same for a large reverb and do it like that. And then, as I said before, what we can do is we can automate our reflections using a different parameter, and we can do the same again. We can get a label parameter, and this is reverb reflections type. And currently, I guess what we could do is go none. We probably need to do the same to the other one as well. And we go short, remove that value, and then yes, we need to edit the reverb one here, and we need to add another one to the top and go none, because we probably want to be able to play these with like no reverb on them as well.
Right, to have the option to just not have anything on. Yeah, for whatever reason, makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess here what we could do is we could also potentially create different different effects chains using the same sort of setup. Oh, sorry. Set that. Yeah, we could create different effects chains using the same setup for different categories of events. So say, for example, we wanted to do We only wanted to send a little bit to the I don't know, to the explosions, or we only want to send, or we want to send more to the footsteps, or whatever you want. But you could duplicate this effect chain and use different ones. We do enter the realm of like we end up having to adjust multiple things, like multiple effects or effect chain, our entire hierarchy, which is not ideal, but we're trying to solve the problem of we're sending different events to different reverb buses and not necessarily just like a whole mixer group. So what we can do here is now we can yeah, there we go. We've got our reverb type is none, small and large. Yeah, so now we can set these parameters on an event basis.
So this works because now if we have like player 1 events and player 2 events, they're now, we can insert different amounts of reverb for each group of players rather than just like the big group, which is player 1 group.
Yeah, well, it's not exactly that. The problem the problem with having separate players is the fact that if one player is in one room and another player is in another room, and we're setting the reverb across the whole game based on the location of one player, we have one of two options: is we either handle both players and we say all events and all groups get affected by both reverb types that they're in, or we have to prioritize one or the other, or blend between the two. I guess there's that option as well. But they're all kind of ugly solutions. This isn't much prettier, but essentially what we can say is that rather than detecting where the player is, we detect where this event is playing. And we say, for example, that our footsteps event is playing in a large space for player 1, and all of the events that are playing within that space get affected by this reverb. And player 2 is in, I don't know, a small space, and this spell plays. And that makes sense because that spell is playing within that small space. So it's not the most elegant solution, but it's certainly one that works. And I would say that one of the drawbacks to this is that, again, you have all of these effects chains across all of your events, and they need to have those to work within the space and work within the game. So it requires a lot of, automated testing, and you can write validation scripts, which FMOD very nicely allows you to do with their scripting language. And then you can sort of select all of them and run your script and check that all of the events that you want to have this effect chain on, that they have them. So that's quite neat. But again, yes, you are adding an event to every, or like an effects chain to every single event. But because they're sends, they don't really take up much in the way of resources. It's not like you're adding a reverb effect on each one of these and then driving that with either snapshots or whatever. We're not using snapshots anymore, and we're using parameters instead. So that's kind of neat. And there's stuff that you can do within your game engine to validate whether an event has a certain parameter on them. So then we can dictate, if this event that we're playing has this parameter, then we will update this parameter on it when it's relevant. Say, for example, there's a sound that, I don't know, a sound of a rocket that plays in one room and it shoots through to the next room. We want to be able to like change the reverb type on that event dynamically for, some sounds, not necessarily all of them, but it would be handy. So yeah, so these are the kind of different stages of adding reverb to your game, and they all have their pros and cons. But hopefully this is something that can inspire you to come up with a good solution that fits for your game. And if you have any other ideas and stuff, I guess it would probably be really cool to hear from the community and see if other people have other solutions that they've used or that they can come up with. And yeah, I'd love to hear it.